Good afternoon, British business podcast viewers and listeners out there. We're at the Business Revival Show in the XL in London. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Sebah. For our viewers and listeners out there, what do you do?
Thank you for having me, first and foremost. So
Pleasure.
I am a health psychologist and I specialize in the field of resilience and well-being. And I've recently started a company called the Resilience School where we teach individuals...
The Resilience School.
The Resilience School, yes, that's correct. So you can think of it as the school that we should have all gone to. So I want to teach individuals the skills to help them to bounce back from all of the inevitable knockbacks that we experience in life, the stress, the adversity. How do we develop the skills to not only just recover, but to truly thrive from our experiences? So the company offers workshops, talks, well-being programs. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
And how long have you been doing this?
So I have been a health psychologist for about a decade. I've been lecturing for about 10 years.
Wow.
I know I don't look the age. But I've only recently come up with the concept of the Resilience School, I'd say about 6 months ago. So it's in its infancy, slowly growing, but I've been speaking and delivering workshops in this field for about 5 years now.
For other employers?
For universities mainly.
Okay.
So my background is an academic, so I'm trying to change my population really. So I'm kind of getting into the corporate world more recently. And
trying to grow your reach.
Trying to grow my reach, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what made you go into this field?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So it's a combination of two things. The first is I am just fascinated with human beings. I'm fascinated with what makes us who we are, why we do what we do, what makes us tick. And more importantly, what gets us through the bad times. So as psychologists, we've moved away from trying to stop bad things from happening because we know in life that these things are inevitable.
Okay.
So instead, what we're saying is, okay, since you're going to experience stress and adversity, rather than trying to prevent those bad things, why not equip you with the skills to help you get back up? So that's the first thing. It's the fascination and curiosity with the subject. But the second thing, and more importantly, was that I experienced my own adversity. So 10 years ago, actually, was when I had gone through personal loss in my family. And it was that bereavement that knocked me down. And I remember there was a moment where I said to myself, if I can get through this, I really want to go on to teach other people to do the same. So that's what inspired me to go on to do a PhD in this area and to learn the skills, to try it on myself. So I was my best kind of student first, and then I went on to develop a program that's been tried and tested. It's evidence-based and rolled out to loads of individuals. So yeah, that's what got me into it.
How long have you been working for yourself? Is that the right term?
Yeah, so I'm still employed as an academic. So
Okay.
I've been lecturing for a number of years. In terms of the Resilience School, I would say since last year, August, September is when I kind of officially made the launch.
So after the pandemic?
After the pandemic, yeah. But the idea has been brewing for a very long time. So I've always had the idea since I qualified. I've always wanted to do something where I can package everything that I've developed, academically, and make it a lot more accessible. So that's one of my passions, is to make everything that I've developed from my time as a student, my time as a lecturer, my time as a researcher, and to package it and actually make it so that the general population can really benefit from it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. There are so many things that spring to mind. I'm so focused in on what you're saying, but
Yeah.
as an interviewer, I'm trying to think of how many areas we could go with this. Mental health and well-being has been a huge issue in the pandemic. Is that your go-to place at the moment? Are you finding that when you speak to your potential customers, or is that what you call them, customers?
Yeah, so customers or clients. So at the moment, I'm really active in research in the area. So
Okay.
I'm currently fascinated by how entrepreneurs and small business owners have recovered from the pandemic. So what are the skills that enabled them to get through the really difficult time, because being an entrepreneur, you have to have a completely different mindset to get into this
Sure.
game to begin with, let alone when you're going through something as challenging
Yep.
as COVID-19 pandemic.
Yep.
So at the moment, I am involved in research looking at interviewing a lot of entrepreneurs, finding out things about, what got them through, the skills, trying to learn from that in order to help others.
So would you say that your time is divided between the research element of what you're doing to find out causes and delivery of solutions to help people through issues?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I would say yes, because the way that I pitch my resilience score is that it is all evidence-based. So it isn't just my personal opinion and, anecdotal evidence, just because I've also gone through this phase myself, but rather it's coming from things that have been tried and tested. We're starting from the ground zero and working our way up. So using a bottom-up approach, finding out what is resilient? What does resilience mean to you? How do you cope when you're going through stress and adversity? Having a deep understanding of that will then allow us to develop interventions, try interventions out in quite a scientific and rigorous manner.
We've interviewed a number of people over the last year, and a lot of our listeners and viewers out there get in touch with us and they ask us questions when you're speaking to business owners and entrepreneurs. The line is so down the middle in terms of, well, I want to deliver a business and a service and a solution to problems. But whilst I'm doing that, I have to build this business. I have to put a brand in place. I have to put a website together. I have to do all of these things that aren't delivering.
Yes.
Have you found issues around those?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you said that. I think as with anything that's new, there's going to be a lot of these issues. So I think it's balancing the frustration of having to do these things and knowing that in the long term they are going to be important, and keeping your mind fixated on that end goal. So it's the whole short-term versus long-term goal, delaying the gratification, knowing that you have to do these tedious things like setting up a website, trademarking the name. So I've trademarked the name now because I think resilience is such a buzzword that I would feel terrible if it got snapped up. So yeah, so I completely agree with what you've just said. And
your journey has started and you have clients. Have you set yourself forecasts? Do you have cash flow spreadsheets? Do you have all of those things? Or is it at the moment you're thinking, you know what, I just need to go out there and deliver this?
Yes, so I would go with the latter, actually. So at the moment, I'm just focused on going out and delivering. But I do know if I'm hoping to scale at some point, this is where, the former would come in really handy. So I hope the next step would be to get a mentor who could really just kind of educate me on that side. So although I feel like I'm an entrepreneur at heart, I'm not business savvy. So I think having the right language, the right mentorship would be really useful, especially if I'm interested in scaling up. But at the moment, with regards to clients, I have tried and tested this within the higher education population. And I've had interest from various corporate companies, but that's still yet to grow even further.
Okay. So who would you say right now was your target audience that you're trying to appeal to?
So I think at the moment the focus is on entrepreneurs, whereas previously it was on students. So we know that, for example, mental health within the student population is such a concern, and I've done a lot of work. So within like the decade of me working in this field, that's been my main interest. But at the moment, I've shifted the focus ever so slightly to look at resilience within entrepreneurs, just because I know post-COVID, everybody's really struggling to readjust. Hence being here at the Business Revival Show and networking with a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs. So that would be my focus at the minute.
How do you start a conversation with a potential client?
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah, I think the initial conversation would be to just understand their pain points. So what is it that you're currently struggling with? What is it that you need help with? So trying to find that missing gap, because if a company, for example, already has wellbeing initiatives, and most do, it's coming in from an angle that they perhaps haven't thought about. So a lot of my work is really tailored to meet the needs and suit the needs of the client, rather than just a kind of a blanket approach, because each individual is going to respond really differently to a resilience program or to a well-being enhancement program.
Having that conversation is after you've had a connection or had an introduction, or even, especially at a business show like this,
Yeah.
you're literally a stranger to a stranger. That person then says, what do you do? Very much like I,
Yeah.
at the beginning of this podcast, asked you what you did. When you talk to people, do most people, because entrepreneurs are supposed to be strong, resilient, and don't do any of those things that
Yeah.
you're here to solve, can you see through that? Is it easy to see through?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't say that I would necessarily see right through it. So what I do, what I would say is what I have had, because I was here yesterday as well.
Oh, wow.
And it's not just entrepreneurs. I think generally speaking, when I say what I
Sure.
do, and whenever I throw out the word resilience, it piques interest. I think it's because it's one of
Great
these.
word.
It is, and I think it's something that kind of universally ties us as human beings. I think it's one of these things that we all have the capacity to build, to develop, and to enhance. So I think just from step one, there is general interest. And then if you apply it to the entrepreneurs, there tends to be interest, but I'm completely with you. You know, some people think, oh, well, I'm just going to focus on my business, cash flow, and I'll just solve the mindset stuff a bit later. But what they don't realize is actually, this is phase number one. And if you don't have this done correctly, that's going to really have a domino effect on your business in the long term. So I think health and well-being has to come first. And then it's, thriving in your business, because if you ignore this domain, everything else will fall through. It is my belief, I think. So.
How do people get hold of you? If they are interested in what you've got to say and want to reach out to you, how do they do
Sure.
that?
So I am on LinkedIn as Dr. Ilham Sebah. I also have a website, so it's www.theresilienceschool.co.uk. And you can also email me on contact@theresilienceschool.co.uk.
Your focus right now for the next 12 months is what?
Is to build the Resilience School, to hopefully grow my reach and my audience, and to continue to be known as the expert within the field of resilience. So you're probably familiar with Brené Brown, Dr. Brené Brown.
You have heard of that, yeah?
Yes, so she does a lot of work in vulnerability and shame. She's also an academic, so I kind of see myself following that path where I want to really excel in this field of resilience. I've spent a really long time studying it, researching in the field, and really honing in that skill. So yeah, my focus, I guess, is to just continue developing my expertise and positioning myself as the resilience person.
Was there one thing that you can pick out from being an academic, from doing all that research, knowing what you know, to then suggesting, do you know what? I want to make a business of this. Is there one thing that stood out for you?
Sure. So I have always been somebody who never focuses on just one thing. So even as my time as a PhD student,
Okay.
I was doing a lot of public speaking and presenting. So I've always had it at the back of my mind that I wanted to kind of marry my passion for speaking and delivering and facilitating with my general interest as a scientist. So I think stumbling across resilience was something that I immediately fell in love with, continue to talk about it, and I think I kind of just naturally fell into developing the Resilience School because it matches all of my expertise, my expert areas, as well as my passion for speaking. So I feel like I can speak to you about this all day. So
There's the passion right there.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I've missed out? Is there anything you want to say? Is there anything that you would like to put out there that we've not covered?
I think we've covered most of the ground. I think one thing I will say is I know that there are a lot of people that work within the wellbeing field. It's such a huge, business field. And just in terms of thinking about what makes you stand out. So if anybody is listening who is really passionate about well-being and wants to get into something similar to myself,
Collaboration.
To collaborate, absolutely, but also just not be put off by the fact that there are a lot of people in the area. It's about understanding what makes you stand out, what makes you different. Why would people come to the resilience school over the hundreds of other things that exist? So it's just remembering that you are unique and your contribution is just as important as everything else that exists.
Dr. Sebah, you're an amazing find. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.